Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Glenn Swanson, and we're going to be discussing his amazing book, The Reincarnation of Leonard, The Misbeliever. And it's available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. And I will say that Glenn was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best publishers in the business, Author Reputation Press. So people, listen to me. If you or anyone you know have a book that they'd like moved, well, give yourself the best gift you could possibly give. Contact ARP and have their wonderful team move it for you. They're one of the best in the business to do it, and they specialize in helping take your literary creation to the next level. Find out more information on their wonderful team through authorreputationpress.com. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Glenn here on the line. Now, the moment you head on over to his Amazon, Barnes & Noble pages, you start to do any research on his book, The Reincarnation of Leonard. Well, you're going to understand what we're discussing today. Now, first and foremost, it's a fictional narrative, okay? So you know there's going to be a heightened sense of entertainment that comes along with it. But people, let me tell you something. This is much bigger than a book, okay? It's much bigger than the words on the page. Now, fictional, yes, but birthed out of realistic circumstances. And I'm not going to go into the origin story. I'm not going to steal his thunder that way because I'm telling you, this is something that really needs to be on your shelf. If at the very least, just for the entertainment standpoint, and hey, I get it, right? I mean, after the past, 3, going on what feels more like 40 years that we've been dealing with this pandemic and the variations of it that we are all still partially dealing with, to this political divide, to the social unrest. Can I just put it out there? It seems like there's just a lot of craziness in the air right now. There's a lot of division. So if you need something to just escape from all of that, hey, I'm right there with you. This book has everything you need. But from an underlying standpoint, in terms of one of the messages that you really can take from this, is something that I know you all can get behind and something I absolutely can. Even in the midst of adversity, there's always a silver lining. People, I love that, right? Persevere and push forward. That underlying sense of hope and perseverance is something I know I need. Right? Listen, it doesn't matter how, when you're up, that's fantastic. But life will tell you, give it time because this too shall pass. Right? I remember hearing an interview one time with Tom Hanks, and he was talking about one of the biggest things that he wished he knew when he was younger was this too shall pass. So listen, you may be on cloud 9 today. Well, stay humble because this too shall pass. And in the flip side of that coin, you may feel like you are in your darkest moments. Well, hey, I got news for you. This too shall pass. I love that underlying message coupled with a fantastically creative story. I'm telling you, you can't go wrong. Amazon and Barnes & Noble are where you have to go, and you have Glenn Swanson to thank for it. And at the end of the day, he's the expert, all right? He's written the book, he's done the research, and he's going to be able to articulate it much better than I ever could. So without further ado, let's bring him here with us, okay? Glenn, first and foremost, man, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing really well today. Thank you for inviting me, Benji.
Of course. Listen, the pleasure is all ours, Glenn. I think what you're doing here is profound. As I mentioned in the opening, from a standpoint of entertainment, this book is fantastic. It has everything you need. But from a standpoint of learning lessons, right, something that you can take and you can truly implement into your lives and help give a different perspective on things, listen, man, you're doing something right. All right. As my grandmother would say, you are cooking with gas, and we are here for it. Now, Glenn, I know we have a lot of information to cover pertaining to the book, man. But before we jump into that, I think it's important to learn a little bit more about your background. So please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. I'd be glad to. I grew up in a large family. It was yours, mine, and ours. My mom died when I was young. Dad remarried,
So
had
sorry.
more kids, and, I was at the top of the heap. And we lived up near Lake Superior in Wisconsin, way up north. Lots of cold weather, but still, it's just beautiful. But sometimes it's serene, but also isolated. And I ended up being one of those kind of people that just, I like my time by myself, and I like to get away. And throughout my life, on the back of my book, I said I've been a mostly productive vagabond. I haven't stayed in one place very long at any given time. Probably the longest time I spent was up in Western Mass. I lived there for 17 years. And there's a lot of references to Western Massachusetts in my book. But, I've been to Spain. I've been an island in the Mediterranean. I've been out to the high desert of New Mexico. I said on my cover of my book, I have just found beauty in all those places. And even still, I've been here in Tennessee about 2 years now. And I'm actually itching to go someplace else. And my wife says, "Oh my God, really?" But I just have, I think, maybe a bit of gypsy in me, or maybe it's some Viking spirit. I'm not sure which.
There you go. Listen, that's not a bad thing. Okay, that's not a bad thing. Having that nomadic lifestyle and just jumping around from place to place. Hey, listen, you got a lot of experiences, right? And that's something to be taken and said for that as well. Glenn, without further ado, man, the anchor for today's interview is all about your book, The Reincarnation of Leonard, The Misbeliever. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure. I identify with Leonard. And Leonard is someone that has such a traumatic loss that he curses himself. And this book is one episode in a cyclic reincarnation, not a single reincarnation. But because of the depth of his feelings, he's, I don't want to say doomed, but he is in that cycle where he repeats it and repeats it and repeats it. And, one of the things that he has to learn is to get himself out of it, because he's put himself there. And nobody else can get himself out of it. Other people can tell you, and in real terms, in life terms, everyone can tell you where you need to go, but they can't make the decisions, and they certainly can't make the follow through. So, he has to get to that point where the hope is more than what drove him to become the misbeliever. And I like to talk about misbelief versus disbelief. The disbelief is like, well, I don't believe that. I don't know what I do believe, but I just don't believe that. The misbeliever is a willful misbelief in what everyone agrees to is the popular paradigm. It's like, no, I refuse to believe that because I believe something else. So no matter how many people or what the society is telling him, Leonard is a misbeliever. He's like, no, that's not how I see it. So that's why we call him Leonard the Misbeliever.
Glenn, let's talk about inspiration next. Okay. And listen, I know from speaking to you that the book originated from something that may have started as a dark place or a darker place, but ended up being pretty cathartic, or at least therapeutic in certain ways. Talk to our listening audience about the inspiration behind this book.
I certainly will. Thank you. I had a beautiful son, and actually he is a twin. My other son is still with us. At 24 years old, he got sick and died in the space of one weekend. On Saturday, I was out building a deck with him, and on Monday, I got a call from my wife at work that paramedics were at the house doing CPR, and I never got to see him again after that. And he was me. He was everything about me. But even better, and none of the bad stuff. And, you have so much hope and plans, and your future is just so projected forward, and that got all changed. And so those dark moments had to come out someplace. And I started on a fictional story, a short story, and it just blossomed, and it became philosophical, and it became theology, and it became society. It just grew. And, really, I think as I was writing through the pandemic and everything about that. And so there was so much of all that energy and that negative energy in the world, and trying to maintain some sanity and some self-awareness that, life could be better. It really came out in this book. I really poured my heart and soul into that book. And you're right, the catharsis helped. My son was beautiful. He was beautiful inside and out, and he was a writer and a poet, and he was working on a film. He was in film school. And so we have so much unfinished business with him. And I had to tell myself, I have to put this down on paper. There's so much here that has to be shared. But in the end, without doing a spoiler alert, there is a resolution, but yet not, to the whole story.
People, again, we're here on the line with Glenn Swanson. We're discussing his amazing book, The Reincarnation of Leonard, The Misbeliever, available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. Glenn, next question that I'd love to get into, and really a curiosity for myself here with this one. What would you say was a highlight for you in writing the book? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you, that you weren't anticipating before you began on this journey?
Well, I came into this, writing this, and it was dark, and it was leading me on a path where I never realized where the book was going. I didn't realize until things started coming around. And the more I poured into it, the more I realized that the things are changing in my book and in my actual life to the better. And we started seeing things in a different light. I think as long as you can share some of these dark feelings, and other people can come along, and at least nobody can help you, but at least they can understand. My book became more and more positive, more expansive. It had a bigger message. I started reading a lot more philosophy, and one of the things that just came out of it was really looking for answers. It's hard to know the questions what you're looking for, but when you start finding some answers that, like, okay, maybe the place where you want to go and, the hurt drags you to isn't where you're supposed to be. And it's not fighting, but it's changing your mind. That's coming back to the misbeliever. I have to misbelieve that this is what was intended. What is intended is the way I want things to go. So I had to make a change in my life, my thinking, my heart, and it reflected in my book as it became further and further into the book. People started doing things, and it seemed like the characters naturally wanted to do some things, and I'm like, oh, I never thought about that at the beginning. So that was a wonderful, the experience of creating something and seeing things sort of, they weren't taking life of their own, but I thought there's no other way this person could have done that. It had to be this way. So, it was fun to write it. It was a catharsis, like we talked about. It relieved me some of that burden. Not that we're not continually sad about the loss of my beautiful son, but there still is something out there that you look at and you think, okay, the life has to go. And if it's not my time yet, well, then I can't just sit and be useless with this time that I've been granted.
Glenn, I love what you're doing here, man. And I love what you just said. And let me explain why. Because everything that you said is kind of like, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm like, listen, man, that's life. That's just being human, right? We're on our journey, and we hit a pothole, and then we're forced to shift perception. We're forced to change from what we initially thought we were going to do. And that is just a microcosm of life, man. Listen, I often tell family and close ones around me that it's kind of like, listen, with each passing year, I've looked at myself, and the one thing that I'm so confident in now, as I'm, getting to my late 30s, about to get into my 40s, is like, I know nothing. I often thought when I was younger, like, oh yeah, I got this all figured out. And you learn a little bit, right? And you kind of get good at the juggling act. But with each passing year, when you start to look back at your younger self and you reflect on moments in your life, the one thing that I am so confident in now is that, listen, I really don't know what the heck I'm doing, right? I'm kind of figuring it out and piecing it together as I go. So when you're talking about that from your perspective and how you had to kind of go through this process, I love what you're saying, man. And again, people, if you take this book and you solely take it for face value entertainment, fantastic. But if it can force you to shift perception and look deeper, not only into the characters that are on the page, but deeper into yourself and your life and your actions, listen, man, there is so much wisdom to be gained. And I love that art can represent that. And this is why this is a book that needs to be on everybody's shelf. People, I'm telling you, Glenn, as we start to close out here, man, because I could sit here, I could talk to you for hours. All right, I can just tell the way this conversation is going. We have that much information that we could discuss pertaining to the book. The conversation can get very deep and philosophical. But for the purposes of this interview, I got to remember this is not about you, Benji. Let's stay focused here. I know about this book.
But you're so right. I just wanted to add something to that.
Yeah, please.
You're right about as you get older, you know you didn't know, and you know that you know even less than you thought you knew. Mm-hmm. And so as you get older, you get that perspective of this vastness that you just don't know. But I think one thing that ends up coming clear is if you don't know, that's all right, because none of us really know. And if people say they know, they don't.
Right.
But you have to listen to your heart. And listening to your heart is really the key, because all the things out there, everybody has a different perspective. Just listen to your heart in those times when you really don't know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely, man. Glenn, I know about this book. I know about your past. I'm focusing now on the future. Please tell me there's another book on the horizon, man. What's upcoming for you?
Well, there is another book, and, same cast of characters. I am thinking about doing something along the lines, and I've got a few chapters. We're working, but I'm thinking it's going to be called something like The Time Looker, being able to somehow surreptitiously gain control of radio telescopes and point in the direction where you find something that maybe you're not supposed to, or that's been hidden from us as humanity. So that's the sneak peek of what I'm doing now.
People, I'm telling you, Amazon and Barnes & Noble are where you have to go, okay? The Reincarnation of Leonard is the title you have to pick up currently, but make sure to check back in frequently, because as he just stated, there's another book on the horizon, and I'm just going to put it out there. Listen, don't be surprised if you start to see either of these books developed into a movie or a television series, because I'm telling you, Hollywood is pretty tapped out with ideas, and we need some creative infusion. And this is so unique. Again, what it can represent, what it can do for every person that picks it up is something that's profound. So be on the lookout for it, because this is going to move some mountains here, man. I really do believe that. Glenn, this has been an absolute pleasure. Such an honor. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
And thank you for having me. I'm glad that you thought the word profound, because that's perfect, Benji. I just really like that, your summation is profound. Thank you. Thank you very much.